Welcome, I'm Dave Youngquist. What we're going to talk about is painting figures with acrylics. Like most people, I started with enamels way back when, and it wasn't until really, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, I was at a show in Chicago, the MMSI show, and saw what some of the Spanish painters were doing with acrylics, and I was literally blown away. I mean, just couldn't believe what kind of detail they were getting. So I said, okay, I've got to learn how to do this. It's a steep learning curve, and we're going to show you some of the techniques that hopefully are going to make it a little bit easier. Things that literally taken me years and years to learn. Hopefully I can at least pass on some of that knowledge quickly. So what we're going to cover to start with is we're going to go through a PowerPoint, and I'll mention this again at the end, that anyone comes to the table, you know, the last cavalry table, shoot me your name and email and I'll send it to you. Okay, so if you've got PowerPoint on your computer, you're all set. You'll get it. So what I'm going to show with this is basically a step-by-step of a 90mm Andrea figure. But before we get to that, there are basic supplies that every painter should have. Number one, in my opinion, you need good brushes. Cheap brushes, you know, they're fine for weathering, creating other effects, but for painting figures, I don't care if you're working in 1/72 or my preferred scale, which is 1/16, you need something that's going to hold a really good point. For base coating, though, you know, when you're just putting down your basic colors, use the cheap ones. Use the nylon brushes that cost $3, $4. You know, they're eventually going to turn into a broom, and then you can use them for, you know, other things. But for painting figures, either look at Winsor Newtons or the Da Vinci's. There's some other brands out there that are good. Those two just happen to be the ones that I use. I like to use paper palettes. You can get these at any, you know, art supply store. Some guys use tile. Some guys use, you know, little paint palettes. It's all valid. I just like these because they are disposable. You slice another one off and you keep going, and they're rather cheap. Wet palette. I get asked about wet palettes quite a bit. I don't use one, but if you're starting, it's not a bad idea. A wet palette really simply is, it's more of a wax paper that is wetted, placed on a sponge in a sealed box so that your paints will literally last overnight. And if you're trying to create, you know, custom blends and things, that could be really, really beneficial. I paint really fast, so I don't bother. I just keep going. A lot of guys also will ask me, what about 10-0 brushes and 4-0 and 5-0? Well, what you're buying in a brush is the tip, the point. A brush that small doesn't hold any paint. And it's going to, especially with acrylics, because acrylics are rough on brushes, they're going to tear that thing up in no time at all. A 10-0 is going to be a broom in less than a week. I mean, it's literally going to fan out. So 99% of my painting is done with a larger brush, with a 1. You know, as long as the point is good. And we'll show you some tips on how to keep that sharp. Paints. There's a ton of brands, lots and lots of brands of paints out there. They're all very good. I just happen to, I like to use the Andrea. Andrea makes a flesh paint set, and again, if you're getting started, this is a real rocking set. And what's nice, I mean, you get 6 colors, but the truth is, those 6 colors, by the time you're done mixing them, I mean, you got 30 or 40 different shades or tones. So, you know, it's still fairly economical. I also use a lot of Vallejo. And we'll talk more about some of the properties of those, you know, when we do just a little bit of live painting. Again, basic color palette here. And if, again, you don't have PowerPoint and you just need me to like email like a single page or something, just let me know. Scale 75 also makes some cool colors, but again, this is kind of my palette. Go ahead. Okay, when selecting something to paint. Again, if you're getting started, I always highly recommend starting with a large scale figure. And typically a bust, if you can. There is some, if you remember, the old Verlinden busts are fairly inexpensive, you know, because a good figure bust today is $50 to $75. A lot of money to spend, you know, on maybe if you're just trying to learn these techniques. And it's, nobody likes to strip paint off all the time. But a big figure is going to primarily focus on the face, which is going to be the most important part of your painting. And that's what you need to learn how to paint, and that's where you develop all your techniques. If you prefer 1/35, which I know obviously a lot of you guys do, it's so much simpler to work down. Trying to learn how to paint some of these fairly complex techniques on a 1/35 scale is just difficult. So I do recommend start large. And if you can, look at the figure before you buy it. If you can't, because I know there's not many places to look at figures anymore, call someone like me, call another, you know, somebody at a shop and say, hey, how good is this figure? Because there's some stuff out there that I don't care what you do, you're not going to make it look good. You know, it's just like a kit. You know, you got a lousy kit, you can't build it to make it look good, and you can't cover, you know, junk with paint. Go ahead.
You got me.
No, that's okay. Okay. Base coat the face. There's a color by Vallejo that I like quite a bit. It's called beige red. Now there's other base tones. I mean, Andrea's got a nice one, but this beige red is a really nice color. It's a very realistic skin color, and it's good for basing. When you're basing a figure, and I'll pass this around here in a minute, but this is base coated with beige red. And what you want to do, again, inexpensive brush, 2 thin coats, but paint the entire figure, you know? Quite often I'll see guys that paint it and then there's the spot left behind the ear. So just take, yes?
So you're not saying the primer?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Thank you. Primer. And a quick tip on primers, there is a auto primer out there. You know, there's lots of hobby primers, but there is an automobile primer out there called Bright Touch. It's a gray, light gray primer. Is the absolute best primer you can buy. Rattle can. What's that?
What was the name?
Bright Touch. Buy it at any auto parts store. It blows away anything I've ever used.
Average of $3 a can.
There you go. And it's, I mean, it's like a Gunzy 1500. It's that tight, you know. Okay, so 2 thin applications, and I will show you what I mean by that. But when working with acrylics, you want to keep the paint mix really thin. So you get that done. Blocking the eyes. On a larger scale figure, I'm going to use a color called pale sand. It's very probably obvious, but you never paint the whites of the eyes white because you'll get that googly eye look. So pale sand. It's just, and you can use a super light pink or a very, very light flesh also. Andrea flat black. Here's the difference in Andrea and some of the Vallejos. When it comes to the darker colors, I always use Andrea. Andrea paints dry, dead, flat. Vallejo paints, which I've only figured out this year, can be made flat, but their darker colors, out of the bottle, always will dry satin on you. Dark greens, dark reds, dark blues, everything. This shouldn't work, but it does. Tamiya flat base that everybody's familiar with. You stick a toothpick in that, and just when you put a little bit of your paint on the palette, and just put the tip of the toothpick in there, it'll flatten it right out. Chemically, they're different, but the paint won't break, and I've been doing it for
What's that name, Brad?
Oh, Tamiya flat base. You know, people use it to flatten out paint all the time, but it will flatten out acrylic colors beautifully. Just got to use a very little bit, otherwise your paint will turn to chalk. So, can everybody see this okay? This is, so we just basically go in with black. You can use the old Shep Payne method, painting a stripe down. Once the flat black dries, I go in with a gray blue or a very light brown. You want to go way lighter than you think you would probably have to. But you always need to leave a little bit of black there. Now, depending if you're right-handed or left-handed, painting eyes can be challenging. Meaning that I'm right-handed. To paint the right eye is difficult because the nose is in the way. You know, you get, it's always in the way of your brush. So, you know, after you've done the base coat and you're trying to, you know, get that black spot in there, turn them upside down. Paint it that way. Much easier. No more nose in the way. Make sure that they're obviously in the right direction, you know. But it can happen, cross-eyed. And the other thing I see a lot of people doing when they're first starting is they make this way too small, just a little dot. No, it should cover about 3/4 of that eye space. Go ahead. Okay, I adjusted them because mine were off, okay? And by adjusting, just a little more pale sand, a little more here, just fussy, back and forth. Hard to see in this picture. We painted in the pupils. Don't paint the pupil in the middle. In other words, man, is that messy. I'm just going to do it quick. Okay, real rough, obviously. There's your eye. When you paint the pupil, we're going to assume that the iris is already in here, okay? But when you put your pupil in, don't center it. It never looks right. If you look in the mirror, your pupil, unless your eyes are really wide open, it's very rare to have it right in the center. Usually there's going to be, you know, the upper eye bag coming down on it slightly. Unless you're going for just like this, you know, a total horror show type of, you know, expression.
So that's how you avoid that Popeye appearance.
Exactly.
So move it more toward the top or offset.
That is correct. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, pay attention, don't pay attention.
Okay.
Question.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Since that's what we're just talking about with both pupils and irises, would you still do that on a 35th scale figure?
Yeah.
Or, yeah?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Well, if it's a good sculpt.
Yeah.
You know, Roger Saunders is here. Hornet, right? Those are incredible. You can do that level of detail. If you're doing let's say a Tamaya or a Dragon or ICM or any of those, no, you're not going to be able to pull it off because the sculpting is not there.
Yeah.
If the sculpting is good, you can absolutely do it. So cutting in, and this is important because with painting the eyes, and it's obviously one of the more difficult steps, you're going to have some slop on the top of the bottom. Using a mahogany brown color, oh, good, I can actually put that in there. I cut the eyes back. It also creates the upper eyelash. So you have this shape, and it's mahogany brown because obviously you're probably going to get some up in here, and so just use a very thin line to cut it back or reduce the size of the eye. Now this might be a little tough to do on a 35th scale figure, but I also drop in a catch light. Catch lights have to be set properly. Look at photographs of people. Everybody's got a catch light in their eye. But if you get them like this, again, your figure is going to look like
Gives it
that.
personality.
Yes. Here. Okay, so lower eye bags, same thing. We cut those back in. And again, I'm going to do a little live painting here for you. We just kind of want to get through this first. So we want to reduce that. I typically use a lighter color. I have seen people where they'll do the lower eye bag in like a black or a very dark brown. Not true at all. That is an area of very high highlights. So you've got your reddish brown here, you're going to have a light highlight here, and then we'll go into the tones of the eye bag. Okay. Shadows. Now, when I'm doing a figure, I do a lot of back and forth, you know, so it's not like all shadows, all highlights, you know. But using this Andrea color, and again, what you're really looking for is kind of a reddish brown tone, you know, and we lay in the shadow colors. Lower eye bag. I know it's a little tough to see in this light, but if you notice the highlight right there, you know, which reduced the size of the eye. We've got a bit of dark brown here. We have that first shadow color, which is kind of, again, a medium reddish brown, not real dark, but enough for contrast. We lay in the color both sides of the nose, around the nostril, underneath the lip. And I'll show you how thin the paint should be, because at this point, you are painting with almost water. And the reason we paint with dirty water is that it allows you to build the color up without committing some major error. Because if you go in and you just put in like a really dark brown, you're done. If you lay, and maybe it's too contrasty, maybe it's not contrasty enough, but with thin layers of paint, again, we'll show you, layer it in, and because the paint's so thin, it dries in seconds, literally. So you go back in, lay that color in again, it's true. I'm done. Or not, you know, just depending on what you're looking for. Add a little bit of that tone into the hollow of the cheeks. So right now we're still, you know, we got our base colors here and here and here, and float that color also into the recesses of the ear. Oh yeah.
Do you ever use retarder?
Never.
Okay.
But
fair enough.
it works for a lot of people.
Okay.
And probably
It's just more of using that kind of the blush, watered down.
yeah, and retarder is good, but I wet blend acrylics, which without it, you know, so it's
Hey Dave,
yeah, man.
when you're talking about the shadows you're dropping in, are you still going back to that beige red, the Andrea's beige red to blend that?
Well, no.
Or are you using just other, whatever color?
Yeah, I'm just using a little darker tone. So I've got my beige red as my base color.
Right.
Now I'm just starting to layer really, really thin coats of paint.
Are you using that to make your mixes, or are you going?
No,
to
I'm just going to a different color.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
But the paint's so thin, you still see the beige red through it.
Sure.
So now we're even getting into more shadows, and now we're starting to pop the contrasts, as you can see. And we're starting to add our highlights. A lot of contrast is okay. Typically, you know, I teach a class once a month in the Detroit area, and most people when they're starting, there's not enough contrast at all. So don't be afraid to get really dark tones here and really light tones here, because you're going to be able to smooth those out. But when you're looking at something at this distance, it's going to pop, you know? And especially if you're doing 1/35th scale or 1/72nd scale. The smaller the scale, it's got to pop even more.
Dave, I noticed that colors, when they're wet, they'll look darker, but then they will dry lighter in color.
There you go. Yeah. So don't be worried about the color, because again, we're putting on paint so thin. If you make a boo-boo, you can go over it with another thin layer of the you know, contrasting color, or maybe the base color because you went a little bit too dark. Okay, I blacked flat earth. Never paint anybody's hair black ever. Never looks right in miniature. I don't care what scale. Browns, blondes, all good. Never ever paint anything in black. Go ahead. You would, sir. Okay. So, further highlights, and again, we're talking about using colors, you know, so get some idea. You know, we started here, which is pretty good, you know, flesh color, and now we're up to a high highlight. High highlights. Top of the chin, right underneath that eye bag. So you got an eye bag with the darker color. So directly underneath it is you put one of your highest highlights, which is not intuitive. You know, you're going, oh no, there's too much contrast there. But again, if you look at photographs of real people or oil paintings, you're going to have high highlights here, here, and real important that most people miss, here and there. So you've got a shadow line here where you've got that crease on just about everybody. Lay your lightest highlight right there. It's probably time to pass this around. 1/9 scale figure. It is a bust. Half of it's straight beige red, other half is finished. So we'll just pass it around and feel free to ask questions as we do it, because it's going to, you're going to actually see what I'm talking about. We use an Andrea number 6. I mean, talk about a dark color, right? That is heavily, heavily thinned out and laid into the hollows of the cheeks, and I also tend to put a little bit in the temple. Painting lips. This took me years to figure out. And you would see it in photographs again, or looking at any one of you, the top lip on any figure, any scale, is really dark red. I mean, we're talking that color. It's in, this is from the Andrea paint set, number 6, but you could use a dark red or black red, but just something really dark. That upper lip is in shadow almost all the time. But the lower lip, okay, now you've got some highlight. And what the heck color do you paint that? Only color mix I found that works for me, and again, any scale, is I use Vallejo dark red, and I mix it with Flat Flesh by Vallejo. Or you could maybe go to a beige red. But it will create a very nice rose color that you can lay in. And that's dry. The very front of it, you're going to use you're going to add a little more flesh to that mix and hit it, because we get highlights right here. So really dark, light. That's actually hopefully a good tip, because it took me a bazillion years to figure that out. Go ahead. Okay.
Dave, for the actual mouth, that's obviously a dark line between the lips, so how do you treat that?
Well, because the upper lip is going to come all the way down. And so now what you're basically doing, in the way my brush strokes work, is that I paint the lighter color forward. So your dark line is part of the upper lip. So you don't have to, again, put that in. 5 o'clock shadow. Okay, this is kind of a tough one. It's not an intuitive color mix. To create a 5 o'clock shadow, which you'll see on that figure wherever he's wandering around, 5 o'clock shadow is actually created from blue, and not a bright blue, but a darker blue or a Prussian blue would work. Stay away, I mean, maybe a deep navy blue, but take that and mix it with your base color, your beige red, into a slurry, which I will show you quick here. And this will give you some idea of how thin this paint should be.
About 50/50, Dave?
I just eyeball it, So I think, bless you. Touch more blue. Okay. So when you're applying that, when I say use a lot of water, so I mean we're just talking about, I mean that's like the water in your cup, when you're cleaning it. That's about the color. But what you can't do when doing a 5 o'clock shadow is brush it on. It won't, you're gonna get tide marks. So you don't paint like this and, you know, a little bit here and underneath the chin. You're gonna get very definitive lines. It's gonna look completely artificial. So what do? You stipple it like crazy. So take a little bit of that, and using maybe not your best brush, because obviously you're going to bang the tip up a little bit, you actually apply it like that, and it's really thin. Your first layer should be almost translucent. Build it up slowly, but do stipple it. It's the only way to get, you know, some, let's say a natural graduation, you know, between the, you know, the skin and the guy that hadn't shaved in a day or two. Go ahead. Okay, we'll get back to the face, but uniform, because I want to really create a, you know, a complete presentation for you. A lot of good field gray colors out there. World War I uniforms, World War II German uniforms. They're slightly different in tone. There's an original World War I mannequin out at my table. You can see some of the colors. So I chose the Andrea Field Gray paint set. Vallejo makes some very good ones. Also, Life Color's got some good colors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, AKM, everybody. One reason I use the Andrea is that I'm depicting this figure. He's wearing the M1907 tunic, for anybody who cares, but it was early in the war, issued 1914. The veterans wore them all through the war as just a sign of status. Hey, I've been here a long time. But it was more of a green color. In the Andrea Field Gray set, really skews more to the green than some of like the Vallejos or what have you, which tend to skew a bit more gray. So that's the reason actually I chose it. And I wanted something to dry dead flat because we're painting cloth. We don't want any shine at all. So from that same paint set, I laid in all the really dark shadows, and again, the paint is just almost like water. Okay. That's a big deal, actually, when you're putting cloth on figures. How do you highlight red? Can't add white, you get pink. Other colors, boop, you're going to skew orange. Dark colors are best highlighted by using Vallejo flat flesh. It is far and away, not the sunny skin tone, nothing, flat flesh. I mean, I caught this from Bill Horan 10 years ago. I mean, he was absolutely right. And again, it's not intuitive. Why would you lighten blue with flat flesh? Why would you lighten red, green, black? All your dark tones can be lightened with that flat flesh. And what it will do is not change the basic tone of that color, because you don't want that. But what it'll do is it'll lighten it and also give it just a slightly worn look, which is very cool. And for reds, you know, if you're doing Napoleonics or something like that, I mean, you've got to be able to highlight it. And you need to go typically a little bit brighter than just a scarlet. Field gray highlights perfectly with Vallejo flat flesh. All these other things have just been blocked in using standard, you know, Vallejo colors. They're just kind of blocked in. Okay, painting gear. Couple things to know when using acrylics. And if anybody's ever watched my videos, we'll talk about wood effects and leather effects. To get a good rifle stock, you know, I use a mahogany brown or any kind of reddish brown typically. But the trick for creating good looking wood grain and that slight sheen that, you know, all wood would have is Vallejo smoke. That is like the miracle paint. Because, number one, it doesn't thin like a regular paint. When you actually thin it out, it breaks. You know, so the first time you see it, you go, oh, that's a bad bottle of paint. Maybe they've got a bad formula, but you can use it to your advantage, because the way it breaks Again, you thin it out very much. Do thin it out quite a bit. Following the grain, and you do this, of course, before you paint the metal parts, is literally, you can streak it. Now, typically, everyone's used oil paints for this. Okay, that's valid. Oil paints are going to work, but this is acrylic, so you don't have to deal with thinners or anything. And again, this dries super quick. So you put one layer on, you let it dry. Put a second layer on until you build up the tone that you're looking for. But while you're doing that, all those weird particulates, which broke when you added water to it, create the grain. It really works. The same thing for leather. You can see some leather here. You can paint that kind of an off brown. You don't want to use the same brown as the wood, obviously. And then use that smoke color over them. When that dries, I would then go over and do some highlights with the original brown color that you used to show a little bit of, you know, scraping or lighter tone that you'd always get on the edge of a belt. Metal effects. It's one way I typically would stay away from acrylics. I base coat anything that's going to be metal in a flat black. But acrylics are way too sparkly. I mean, they just, if you're, and the smaller the scale, the more sparkly they get. You know, everybody knows that. So there's a couple ways to do it. And there's a lot of new products out. There's the Ushi powders, which are really nice.
Lucian powders?
Ushi Van der Rosen powders. They're metallic powders. They're super, super fine. There are, you know, the L-clads, but you know, you're not gonna spray something that big, I wouldn't. There are the new AK waxes. They're good, but again, those are buffable. Sometimes kind of hard to buff. Humbrol, the old metal coat, the old standby metal coat, really works well. It is a buffable paint, but because it thins so nicely, you paint it on, polish it out, and you get a real nice finish. The other thing is that what you can do, and especially for like the buttons and stuff, use a number 2 pencil. A number 2, you know, regular pencil. It works great. And then all you would do is take an old brush, you know, maybe, you know, you chopped it down and you're using it for, you know, whatever. Buff it out, you've got an absolutely killer, realistic metal finish. It's just graphite. And that's the way, actually, all of that was done. And you can see the wood handles here, the different leather effect here, and the stock there. This model is actually on my table, so you can, you know, if you want to stop by and take a peek at it. Go ahead. Okay, I just covered all of that. But it's in, you know, if you want to get the, you know, this presentation later, it'll be there for you. Go ahead. Okay, another area we're going to talk about stippling, and I wonder how well you can. Yeah, you can see some of that. So all these cloth effects, base coated, right? Then we go in with the stippling effect. And a stippling effect, in this case, we're basically taking a tone, let's say we're talking, okay, Vallejo khaki. Right there, there's a gas mask bag. We would then add a little bit of white, maybe a little bit of flesh, but a lighter color, a little bit of pale sand, and you're going to stipple that in the areas that receive the light. And you can tell that because you can take your lamp and put it right over the figure, and you will see where the highlights are supposed to be. So you stipple that on. Then, right on the edges, then you take your same basic color, maybe add a little bit of burn umber to it. I mean, we're talking subtle differences. You stipple that on. Now you've got the effect of canvas, okay? When you try to, or if you did just paint smooth lines, it's not replicating cloth or any type of material. It's just a really maybe nice painted something or other. Wool canteen. I've got a bunch of them. Yeah, they're real fuzzy. So you stipple, and you see, and again, you adjust your color depending on how light would be hitting it. Typically, we paint with light at 12 o'clock. I've been experimenting. I've been doing like light at 9 o'clock, and that's a whole nother discussion. But you can do some really amazing things. The whole uniform was painted that way too. It's all stippling. Once that base coat's down, I stipple on the highlights. I stipple in the shadows. That's how you create the texture. And it has one other really cool benefit. You can be a little sloppy. You don't have to be the cleanest painter in the world, because these edges now are being stippled. So when you're trying to figure out, a lot of people say, well, acrylics, oh, it's too hard, the transitions. You know, I've got a highlight, and I've got a medium shadow, and I've got a dark shadow, and now I'm back to a highlight, and it just looks like, you know, stripes on a wall. Well, if you stipple it, those transitions are no longer harsh, because this edge is broken. All these edges are broken by these different tones. Okay, and this is just some more, this is the more basic stuff. You know, it's kind of giving you some paint formulas. Burn Umber by Vallejo should be in every single painter's box. It is the absolute, my favorite color, period. I use it on everything I do.
What is it again?
Vallejo Burnt Umber. It is basically a dark gray brown, but it is applicable to just a million different, you know, shades and tones. So, you know, when you're going, you know, the grenade bag here is a nice color. Well, we got to start creating some mud effects. So what do? We go back to stippling. Now we go back in with some burn umber, maybe a little lighter burn umber, a couple other darker tones. Go ahead. Okay, basically some color mixes there. Trench, scratch built, driftwood, didn't have to paint it, it's already there, it's good. And then it's just, you know, basswood and ground effects. We do want to talk real quickly, see all the mud effects on his knees. There's a couple really cool ways to create mud effects. And there's a couple good products for that. Guys who attended the Wilder demonstration yesterday, Wilder makes textured earth pastes. Basically what it is, it's an acrylic paste that already has grit in it. Some fine, some, you know, I guess rougher. Vallejo makes something called dark earth effect. Again, it's a big jar of acrylic paste. You know, I mean, it's thick. It's like almost like peanut butter. But what's amazing about that stuff, again, using a shredded brush, creating some mud effects, stipple it on. And it's acrylic, so if you want to change your tone, add paint or add pigment, you know. So you stipple that mud on, let it dry, then you could put thinned out acrylic washes over it, slightly change the tone. We add a little bit of pigment. You've got the best looking mud effects in the world, and it's really simple. The same exact effects work on armor. With armor, I always throw a little bit of static grass in there too. Static grass, you know, just to get a little more texture. But that's how all that was created. I mean, it's really a very cool effect, not a whole lot of effort. The area is done. Reference material. Books.
Is that authentic?
Yes, that's part of my collection. You can't beat the real thing. Buy books. I mean, I buy way more books than I buy models or anything else. But there's the grenade, you know, that he's actually holding. There's the can, and there's the 98 AZ carbine, double canteens, and redback. Am I done?
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
But, all on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, I've got tons and tons of videos on YouTube. How am I doing on time?
We're about 38 minutes, so that's cool. And I'm not even gonna stop this recording. I'll just edit this little bit out. But let me move the camera
Yeah.
and
Okay.
adjust some of my little.
Yes.
Where is your table out there?
By the bar. So I'm right in between the bar and the restroom.
How'd you get such great placement?
I have friends in high places.
Well, in places.
In places, yeah. Friends in low places. Yes.
Not the figures that your videos on YouTube.
All right.
No, but it's the same scale. Thank you. Okay, so
Proceed on.
great. So everyone had a chance to look at this guy. So you can see where a lot of those techniques, what the results are.
If you don't mind, some of them can get up closer if you want them to be closer.
Oh
It's
yeah.
up to
So
you.
what I just want to show some basic techniques, and mostly, really, because like any type of modeling, it's just practice and practice and practice and practice. But I think what you need to see is how thin the paint should be, how it should be applied, how you go from this color to that color. So, take the one side. Bless you. Again, you'll notice I am in the water constantly, because acrylics dry really quick, and the acrylics can get up into the ferrule of the brush and you're toast. That brush is broomed and you're done. I'm using, again, number 1. It's got a good point. That's all we need. I'm going to skip painting the eyes because, again, there's a 15-minute long video you can see, and I want to be able to kind of cover this. So here's I'm basically using a highlight color right at this point. Again, there's no rules whether shadows first or highlights first, just whatever I feel like at the moment. So you can see the paint is really thin. Okay, it's almost, again, just like dirty water. And we can see that. Then what you need to do, because if you apply the paint just like this, it's going to dry with tide marks. Tide marks are a nightmare to get rid of. And what a tide mark is,
Hard line.
yeah, it's a hard line. When you go to the beach,
Yeah.
you see those lines. And acrylics will, if there's too much water in the paint, they will break and they will dry. And you know what? It's a ridge. You can't get rid of it. You're going to have to sand it off or strip it. So what do? So you get that really thin paint, just get rid of the water. So all you've done, so your paint's still thin, but now all your excess water is gone, So we're going to go right underneath the eye bag. And if you can see, stippling it out. Up here, I'll do one more here. I'm going to move around.
No, you're fine.
Okay. You see how thin that is? So you can still see the beige red underneath it. Okay? Okay? That makes sense? Which is really, really thin.
Yep.
Okay, so it's translucent, everybody can see that.
Use filter and wash, Dave, they understand that.
It's a filter. That's what we're doing, yes.
And you
So-
stipple the edge of it to
To-
pull away your.
That is correct.
Time
Yep.
lapse.
You're putting tiny dots and then dragging through the dots.
No, I just kind of, just a little bit of that. But that's how thin your paint should be. And now, because it's obviously not anywhere near as the color I want, I just go back in And you just keep applying it. Just keep doing it, and doing it. We'll show you that eye bag. So I'm just going to bounce around like crazy here. That's actually how I paint. Maybe it's just keep myself amused or something. But so we're going to put that really dark color in there. And then a figure, in this paint, you'll notice, because I'm doing almost a solid color, it's not as thin. And with acrylics, learning paint consistency is far and away the most important thing, and it takes a long time. Typically, you want to keep it, consistency of melted butter, but that's only typically. You just have to learn. I know it's going to sound weird, but I could feel it, because I just do it so much. I mean, I paint almost 150 figures a year for the William Britton Company, and you got to be really quick, because I've got 5 days, 5 complete figures done, So with this color, we're just going to go in a little bit here, and then you've got all that area in here. Highlight colors. Oh, you know what? Sorry. Get ahead of myself here. And we're repeating a bit of what we've done, but that color, we talked about that brown color, at the side of the nose. You can see it goes underneath the lip. Wash it into the ear. So this is a bit more of a wash as opposed to a filter. It's a little heavier. Light color. Just to kind of show you where these colors, colors land. Here is a really cool tip, because especially in 1/35th, where you're trying to float all these different colors on this figure, and you're trying to get these dark red tones in, and it's not turning out right. Everybody's got a box of these at home, I bet. If not, you can get one. They're cheap.
Chalk pastel?
What's that?
Are they chalk pastel?
Yeah, just cheap old, Weber Costello, any single. Yeah, not oil pastels, just the cheapest ones you can get, and these are the earth tones. Using an old brush, pretend it's an old brush. There's one tone in there. See, it's fairly well used. It's a rust color. So right now, again, we didn't do much. We just got that one. Far from being, walk over here, far from being completed, right? But you can see it's translucent. You can still see all the base colors and everything through there. So you're working in a smaller scale. You've tried some of these techniques, and you're going, Dave's an idiot. This isn't working at all. All I've got is a blotchy. Everything looks like a clown face. Paint it beige red. Do get in some of your higher highlights, even if you just want to add just a little flat flush of beige red, just to pop it here and here at a bare minimum, in the bridge of the nose and the sides of the nostrils. Then take your little bit of pastel, right in the hollow of the cheeks. And the figure just going to pop. It's makeup, but it works. It pops.
Do you have anything on the brush when you lift the pastel off?
No, just dry. But you put a little bit of that pastel color in there, and a little bit up into the temple.
Are you trying to get it maybe when it's a touch wet?
No.
So
No, after it's completely dry.
after it's dry. Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise because pastel has a little bit of
It'll
granules.
gunk up. It'll
There you
block,
go.
congeal.
But you can see, just almost immediately, you've got a really easy technique to add some spark and life to your figure. I wouldn't use it on a figure this scale typically, but boy, if you're doing little stuff, you want something to pop on the table really quick, almost no effort, that's how you do it. Do it with that.
Dave, you put a seal over the top of that at all?
No, I don't seal anything, ever. But I don't touch my figures, you know, I don't touch, if I'm building a tank or an aircraft, I don't touch them, you know? So, no, I don't seal anything.
So you don't play with your figures when you're done with them?
Never. Well, it's dangerous. I mean, you know what it's, I mean, boy, you get something goes bad with a can of that stuff. And the problem is when you seal them, all the hard work you did to create these satin finishes are all gone. The glass, oh, yeah. I glass the eyes too. So there is a glass in there. When that's done, that little tool Vallejo smoke we were talking about, I sometimes glaze a little bit of that. And again, I can't get into all stuff, but I mean, on a larger scale, you know, we paint tear ducts and everything else. So again, best advice I can give you is just paint really thin and get rid of the excess water. And watch some videos, and you can always email me. That's it. Yes. Couple questions. Yeah, sure. Questions.
At the very beginning, did you say this PowerPoint was available somewhere afterwards?
Yeah. You could
Where, how? Just contact me?
just contact me. You know, come to the table. I'll give you a business card. Or